this is the Creations by Michiè number 123 pattern. It's an adorable little sunsuit, perfect for the spring or summertime. So first you'll need to trace out the pattern pieces. I know, Children's Corner has spoiled me with not having to trace out, but it's not that bad, just trace them out and let's get down to the sewing. Now I'm making the smocking version with the skirt. I figured that cotton covers all the looks and you can subtract if you're not making this view. So when I was done cutting, I had one big front that'll be used as the lining. If you're not making the smocking front, then you'll cut out two of these. So then I had a bib top piece and a bib bottom piece since I'm putting the smocking in between these two. And I cut some of this lightweight batiste so I can use it for the skirt. Notice I've included the selvage edge. I thought it was really pretty, so that'll be the finished edge of the skirt. Otherwise, you could finish it up with some lace or turn it over twice, whatever suits you. It's sewing, you do you. And when I cut out that skirt, I used the pattern to measure the length and width. Then I cut a slit in the fabric where that measurement was and ripped. It's so much easier than using a rotary cutter, and you'll be sure that you're on grain too. I did the same concept to cut the smocking insert fabric as well. Then I have the bubble front and the bubble back pieces as well. I also cut out some bias pieces of the skirt fabric, and all these little finishes are up to you. That's fun part of sewing, you do you. So I took those bias bands and folded them in half, gave them an ironing, and used some cording to make some custom piping. I'll link where you can buy this cording if you're interested down below. Then I rolled my smocking insert fabric up on a dowel. At this point, it was the full width offered from my fabric, which I believe was 60 inches wide, and this allows you to see how gathered you want those pleats. I tend to like mine on the 2.5 times scale, if you will. That allows you to see each pleat. But again, you do you. So once you run it through your pleater, you can take the blocking guide pattern piece and pin it to some Reynolds freezer paper. There's a link where I got mine down below. And cut it out with some craft scissors. Then you can pull a handful of those pleats out on one side, and this will give you some seam allowance. And then I went ahead and tied those off in groups of 2s or 3s. Then you can pull the threads from one end to get everything bunched up, if you will. This makes sure that all your pleating threads are pulled taut and help get your pleats lined up so they can be adjusted easily. From there, you can adjust your pleats, and remember, like I said before, I ripped the whole width of my fabric so I could adjust my pleats to the ratio that I liked and then cut off the extra. So you can see I'm putting the blocking guide on top of the pleated fabric after it's been adjusted and pulled out the pleating thread so I have some seam allowance. And then this was a baby wearing day. Sometimes Audrey just wants to be held, and there is no complaint over here, so we just sew together. She's so sweet and such a big help. I'm not sure how I ever sewed without her. No, but really, she's very, very sweet, and I love those days. So then I tied off the other ends in groups of 2s or 3s, and oh, that child, what a crazy little girl. After trimming off the threads from the second side, I adjusted the gathers so they are evenly distributed and put the freezer paper down on the pleating side insert with the waxy side down. Gave that an iron in with a dry iron, and the freezer paper will hold all your pleats in place. And I have a more detailed video that I'll link below if you'd like to see it. Then I added my piping on the 5-inch seam allowance mark. I'm not sure why the seam allowance was so large for this outfit. Once I had the piping on top and bottom of the smocking insert, then I peeled off the freezer paper since the piping has the pleats secure. Of course, look over the pleats and make sure you like them before removing this freezer paper. If there's any deviations, go ahead and fix them now before you remove that freezer paper, and if the paper starts to come off before you're ready, just iron it in place again. So then I sewed the top and bottom part of the bib to the smocking insert, and I sewed these pieces to the smocking insert with the insert facing up so I could use the stitches from the piping as a guideline. I sewed just inside these stitches. After I gave everything a good ironing, then I attached the back of the bib at the shoulder seams. Again, using this large 5/8 of an inch of a seam allowance. Don't ask me why, go ask your mother. Then I ironed those seams up and repeated the same step to the lining, matching up the lining front with the lining back and attaching those at the side seams. So this next step is optional, but if you like to add some lace to the sides of your bib section, you'll want to do that now. I decided to add some Swiss entrecôte beading stuff and then some lace. And you'll want to add it right next to the last pleat. I'll show you the difference if you don't do this later on in the video. So I attached the beading lace first. If you like to attach the lace to the entrecôte, you can go ahead and do that, but I decided to hold off. One less thing to worry about getting stuck in those seams. So regardless of whether or not you added any lace treatment or whatnot to those edges, oh, that would also be adorable if you did rickrack. Okay, squirrel. No. You'll pin the lining of the bib to the bib. If you did add some sort of lace or trim to the edges, be sure it's pinned towards the center of the bib and away from those edges. You don't want to get this stuck in the seam. So I matched up the shoulder seams, and then I took this to my machine. I sewed along both the outside edges as well as the center back, around the neckline and down the other center back. Then I clipped the corners and curves around that neckline. I also trimmed up the seam allowance. Next, I pulled the back through the front side of the bib. This turned the entire piece right side out. After doing this to the other side as well, I used my new fancy schmancy little tool to push out the corner edges. And then I gave everything a real good ironing. This bib section will look like a hot mess until you iron it really well. And ironing is so important if you don't want your creations to scream, "Well, my mama made this." You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Anywho, again, optional, but I finished up that beading entredeux with some lace edging. And I have a detailed video on how to attach entredeux to lace that I'll link below. Once I gave that an ironing, I was done with this bib section and I can move on to the bubble bottom. So you'll need to grab the bubble front and bubble back pieces. I took the bubble back piece and cut a slit down the middle of the back. Then I cut to the left about 5/8 of an inch and cut to the right about 1/4 of an inch. Now reverse the left and right if this is for a boy's garment. After zigzagging both sides, I ironed the 1/4 inch side over so it was flush at the bottom. And then I placed this mock placket, if you will, like it will be overlaid when it's being worn, with the right side over the left for a girl or the left side over the right for a boy. Once everything was in place, I pinned it and took it to my machine so I could zigzag over those raw edges. This is kind of a way to do a placket without using the continuous placket method. Now, I do like that method too. Kind of honestly just depends on my mood for the day. And I've been doing this mock placket for a couple months now, and I think I might go back to the continuous placket method. I don't know, we'll see. I do like both methods for different reasons. I'm not particularly married to either one either. So anyhow, once the placket was good and ironed, attach the front to the back of the bubble using French seams. And I have a detailed video on how to do French seams that I'll link below. Moving on, I put 2 rows of gather stitches around the waistline. The idea is that you want 1 row of gather stitch on each side of where the permanent stitches will go. So then you can gather the skirt up. Okay, and then truthfully, I forgot all about this skirt. And once I had the garment completely together, I remembered. So I tore apart the seams, and if you're wondering why the skirt disappears here and there, that's why. Anywho, so take the skirt. If you're making that version, you'll want to finish those back edges first. So what I did was I folded it over 1/4 of an inch and then ironed it in place, and then again another 1/4 of an inch and ironed that in place, and then I sewed that. And I did that on both edges. As you remember, I cut mine on the selvage edge, so I had this little pretty selvage edge as a skirt bottom. And then you'll put 2 rows of gather stitches in the top of that as well. Then gather up both the bubble and skirt to fit the waistband. I found it was easier to just gather the bubble first and then to gather the skirt next. So once both pieces are pinned in place, stitch them to the skirt band. Then I threaded an 1/8 inch wide piece of ribbon through that beading lace. I did 2 pieces on each side so they could meet around the shoulders and get tied in a bow. Now this is obviously completely optional and completely up to your design minion. Okay, so I didn't do this since I like to save my smocking and hand sewing towards the end, but this would be the time to do your smocking. Otherwise, you'll have to rip out some of the next stitches I'm about to explain to be able to smock. So learn from my mistake and do your smocking now. Then you can pin your bib front and back pieces to your waistband. You'll have the bib front centered and the bib back edges flush with the back of the bubble. Then pin your other waistband on top. This is going to give you a waistband sandwich. You'll have your bib part in the middle and the waistbands on either side. Sew that in place, going from one center back of the waistband around the waist part down the other center back part. Then I ironed all of that and ironed the bottom edge of the lining band under 5/8 of an inch. This is how you can enclose those raw edges, and I left this to be whip stitched later on. If you've seen my videos before, you know that I like to save all my hand sewing until the end. So now you're on to the last part, finishing up that crotch area. To begin, I folded up the crotch about 1/4 of an inch and ironed that in place. Then I folded the whole part until it was flush with the leg area and ironed that in place so I could sew it in place. Then I trimmed up those little corners that folding leaves you with. Then to do the casing, I folded about 1/4 of an inch all the way around and ironed that in place. Then I folded up about 1/2 an inch and ironed that all the way around. I took that to my machine and stitched on the edge of the fold. Then I cut 2 pieces of elastic, so you can reference your patterns or you can measure your child's leg circumference to get this measurement. I used a safety pin to feed 1 piece of the elastic into the casing. Now I forgot to film this part and I'm really sorry, but when your elastic gets about 1/4 of an inch away from the end of the casing, go ahead and stitch this in place so it secures that end. And then you can continue to feed the elastic through to the other side and again stitch this in place. Once you repeat that to the other side, you'll be done with your machine sewing and you can go whip stitch that lining band in place as well as put snaps or buttons or whatever you decide to close the back of your bib. But how adorable is this pattern? Here is 7-month Audrey in the 6-month size. I'll post her measurements so you can reference. And here what I was talking about before with the pleats. You'll want to sew right along that pleat edge. If you leave a little bit of gap like I did here by mistake, it doesn't look as clean, you know what I mean? So maybe you can even have one sacrificial pleat where you pleat in between 2 pleats just to make sure you've got a pleat there right next to your good edge, but you want to make sure you don't have a gap. And I'm showing you mistakes. Remember, I am self-taught for the most part, so I do make them. Anywho, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. As always, I appreciate y'all for watching and I hope to catch y'all next time.